Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today we have a special guest, Susan Brearley, joining us from Poughkeepsie, New York, my neighbor. She is the editor-in-chief of MuddyUm, the premier humor and comedy publication on MuddyUm.com. She has coached and influenced thousands of writers to trust their voices and write humor, comedy, fiction, essay, poetry, and more. She's a serial top writer on MuddyUm, a published author, and frequent anthology contributor. She is also a chef, poet, visionary, founder, entrepreneur, sailor, coach, and luminary who has been writing comedy since third grade. And she is also a single mom of two adult boys. Welcome, Susan. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Irina. It's my great honor to be here, and I am so grateful to be able to have this conversation with you this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. So please share with us your story. How did you become a single parent? Was it by choice, an accident? What happened?
Oh, goodness. So interestingly enough, I have two boys, as you mentioned. They are actually 20 years apart. The brothers are 20 years apart.
Oh, wow.
The first boy I had when I was very young. And I think as happens for a lot of young people, young girls, um, when we have our children too young, it's not necessarily that we chose it consciously, but rather unconsciously, that we may have been in a situation, and I know this certainly was true for me, and I think it's true for a lot of young girls, that we're in situations where we feel like the home situation is so toxic, so unfriendly, so unsupportive, that we feel the only way we can get out of that is to go start our own life. And nothing starts your own life more powerfully than getting pregnant and having your own instant family. And it's not optimal. It's not the best way to go. But for some people, it feels like it's the only way out. And that was certainly the case for me. And and I loved his father and I loved him. And he was the great joy of my life. And he is today also a chef, an award-winning chef. And he has a wife and two children. I'm a grandmother, and they're very happy. He's having a really happy life. But that was a lot of work. And as being a single parent, his father and I think, were together for only about 1 year. And that became very toxic. And so then I was on my own. I remember I had an apartment, and there was a woman who lived in the apartment next to me. And I remember sitting on the stoops, the front stair stoops to the apartment building, and just crying. She was a single parent too. She had two young girls. And I remember crying and saying, I don't know what to do. I come from a family of all girls. I have this little boy. He must have been not maybe a year old at the time, very young still.
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm doing. And she just looked at me and said, Sweetie, you're already doing it. You're in it. Right. And all I could focus on was what I didn't at that time, what I didn't know, what I thought I didn't know, and feeling overwhelmed in that moment. And her little phrase of encouragement, you are already doing it. was exactly what I needed in that moment to have more confidence that you're right. I'm already doing this day to day. It is really focus on the what you are doing rather than what you don't know or what you think you can't do, but focus on what you can. So that was a huge defining moment. And sometimes those defining moments come from, the neighbor next door. They come from um, the random people that show up in our life. They could show up in a grocery store and give you a hint or a tip with your child. And if we're open enough to listen to what people are saying, our support group becomes this web of humanity that are just all around us. The good people with good hearts who are willing to just share a hint or a tip. There are some people who say, it's not my business. I don't want to say anything. But sometimes those people that are saying something have some little tidbit of wisdom for us that can help support us along the way.
You're
And
so
then
right.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, you're so right. Sometimes it's those little things that we just need to hear. And I love how, she pointed, you're already doing it, you're already in it, you don't need to worry about, because we always think, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, you're already doing it. You're already doing something.
Right. Yeah, and I think as single parents, women who are single parents, we're harder on ourselves we're more hard on ourselves than anyone else can be sometimes. Um, we do this thing, right? We self-gaslight. We have millennia of experience of this experiential genetic baggage that says you're a woman, shh, sit down, be quiet, don't make noise, don't ruffle any feathers. And yet, we have this awesome responsibility for teaching, raising, imprinting, programming the minds of our next generation, of our children, of our girls and our boys. We have this amazing responsibility. So if we don't like the world the way it is, we really have to think, what are we saying to, how are we influencing those around us, starting with the very young? Because we make a difference. That woman that sat on the step who said, you're already doing it, I don't even remember her name, but I remember what she said because I remember how she made me feel, right? That's a famous line, right? Famous poet's line. People will, you'll forget what they said, you'll remember how they made you feel. Well, in this case, I remembered both because it was such a big moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to think about that also from our own standpoint. Like, what am I saying? What am I putting out into the world? What am I saying? What am I sharing? How am I influencing? Because words have such power, don't they?
They do. They do. And it's especially so when nobody is watching what we are saying to ourselves. Like you said, how we are gaslighting ourselves, how we, feel that we are not good enough, we are not doing enough, we're not being enough, we're making all the mistakes.
Yeah.
And we miss out on all the good things we are doing. We forget to remember because our mind always focuses on the negative. And
Yeah,
regardless,
the brain's this giant filtering machine. And we actually, the world is full of all the possibilities. There's infinite possibilities in the universe. And that means all of it, all the positive, all the negative, all of it. And so, but what we focus on is what we see. So, a good example, my favorite example of this, it's selective attention, it's called in psychology, psychological principle. Selective attention. So, if someone says, "Hey, where's the cheese?" where's the cheese in the refrigerator? Somebody's in my house and says, where's the cheese? And then I describe to them in detail where the cheese is, how to find the cheese. And then they go to the refrigerator and they open the door and they say, I can't find the cheese, but I know I gave excellent instructions. They really are not looking for the cheese. They're really not paying attention to what I said in the instructions, and they really are not looking for the cheese. So if they were really looking for it, they really listened carefully and they really looked hard, they would find that cheese because it's in there. Refrigerators aren't that big. But we truly find what we are searching for, what our brains are really searching for. We will find that thing. So if we are looking for all the negative, we will certainly find that. If we're looking for all the positive, we will certainly find that because it's out there and it exists. So these are principles that I used in raising my children. And the second son, it's interesting because my two sons are very different from each other. Of course, they're 20 years apart, but I was two different people too. Mm-hmm. You know, the first one I had, I was very young. I was a teenager. The second one I had when I was 38.
Oh, wow.
So 20 years apart. And at 38, by the time I was 38, I had a full career with IBM. I was making good money. I had discretionary funds to spend on my second son that I did not have for the first one. So, you know, we were really counting pennies for the first one. And for the second one, he did not have that same experience. Mm-hmm. So I was different. So the two boys are different. But in both cases, I was very careful. And this was something I learned from my grandmother. I was blessed to have a grandmother who was a clinical child psychologist. And of course, PhD level. And of course, back in those days, there were not a lot of women in the field. Mm-hmm. She believed that our brains are one of our biggest gifts, and it is a big gift. We have so much capacity, and that it's not as important the quantity of time that you spend with each other and with your children even, but the quality. And what does that look like? What do you do with the 10 minutes you have? So for the first son, where I was, working all the time, and the time that we got to spend together was very precious. It was very important that in those moments, the words I spoke and the things we did together left an imprint on his heart. And so when he went away, he finally, in high school, he went away to school. He got to go to a boarding school. Oh, he wrote me the sweetest letters and poetry. And both my boys are like that. That quality time meant that we forged a bond, an unbreakable bond, really, in how we feel about each other. Beautiful. Even though my first one says, Mom, you know how you took care of your grandmother when she had dementia at the end of her life? Well, I'm not doing that for you. You're going to go at home. But, I get it. He has a wife and 2 kids, and he has priorities. My second one, though, he's not married and he doesn't have children. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, I'm going to take care of you when you get old. That touches my heart.
That's so sweet. Awesome. So what were the challenges or struggles you faced when you were a single mom?
Well, financial, certainly. Being a young mom, you just don't know where you're getting. You're living hand to mouth kind of. You just don't have the financial resources. It's hard. And so we had to rely a lot on family where we could, and we had to do without a lot. You don't know, you say no a lot.
Mhm.
Mom, I want this. Nope, sorry, can't have it. Can't get it. It's interesting how that lack of, material goods when he was growing up, the first one, how that affected really both of us. You would think that that might turn you into a stingy person, but actually, it was the reverse. He went to an elementary school where he was a minority. As a white boy, he was a minority in the school. And so it was an inner city school, and he uh, was surrounded by children who also had not a lot of money and not a lot of things to, not excess, no excess things. So people made, so the children made up games and played on the playground and shared things a lot. They shared all together what they had, and that made them very close. So after school, many days he would come home from school, and he had been, for a couple of holidays, he had been given gifts of, like uh, oil oil crayons, really beautiful art oil crayons, and some other things that were, special gifts for him that were creative. He had a good collection of books, and he had a skateboard, and so the other boys from the school, after school, we had an open door policy, and the boys would come in and play, and they would all play together, and he shared everything he had with all the other boys. And so our place became known as a safe place for them to play after school. So they weren't outside playing on the streets, and they had a good place and with guidance, right? And snacks, after school snacks, and the whole thing. We just had an open door policy. Well, one day, one of his treasured possessions went missing. Somebody took it, and I noticed it, and he noticed it. And so I said, so that next day when we noticed it, all the children who came to the door, I stood at the door when they came in, and I said, this thing, and I described it, went missing. And I want to let you know that while you're here, you can play with anything that's here. But if things start to go missing, we're going to have to close the door, and we can't let people in anymore. And we don't really care who took it. And we don't really care any of that. And no one's going to get in trouble. But we'd like it back because everybody's sharing and playing with these things.
Mhm.
And I said that to all the young boys that came that day. Well, about 2 days later, two boys showed up at the door
Mhm.
because, they needed to support each other because they weren't really sure they weren't going to get in trouble. Like, this could be too good to be true. Really, we're not going to get a spanking. What's happening here? And so two boys showed up at the door, and the two of them offered up the missing thing.
Mhm.
And I said, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And then it never happened again.
Mhm.
And they didn't get in trouble. But those moments, right? How we handle
Mhm.
those really difficult, challenging moments really makes a difference in what happens in their brains when they're little, and how do they handle their environments and their challenging moments as they're growing up and they go out into the world. Do they learn love and compassion? Do they learn to share? Do they learn ways and strategies for how to resolve, right, the most difficult conversations and the most difficult challenges?
Yeah.
What did they learn? And we are the ones that imprint that. And this is hard. When you're a teenager, you're barely an adult yourself.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I had the grandmother and the mentors that I had. I had two great mentors. I had my grandmother, who was the psychologist, and I had a friend in high school who was a Jungian psychologist also.
Mhm.
And the two of them were instrumental in helping me reframe and shape my mind in a very difficult family environment of my own growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. What were some of the things you wish you knew when you were struggling, looking back?
Wow, what a great question. Well, from one standpoint, I mean, I was a forever learner my whole life. So even when I got pregnant with my first one, I sought out a class. There was a class in our community called STEP. It was called STEP was the acronym for Systematic Training for Effective Parenting.
Mm.
So I recognized, when I sat on the step with that woman and she said, "You're doing it," but I still recognized that I felt ill prepared. Even with all the books I could read, I felt like I didn't have the strategies that I needed. And so I found this course and I took it. And that made a huge difference in being able to figure out what to do in certain circumstances. When you're faced with a screaming baby that might have colic and they don't stop,
Mm.
what do you do? I did babysitting for a while to make a little bit of money, and a mom dropped off her child, and the child that was having an asthma attack in the morning, and I didn't know.
Mm.
And the child just didn't stop crying. And at some point, it got worse and worse and worse. And I called the mom at work and she said, "I can't leave work." I said, "Well, I'm going to the hospital with your baby."
Mhm.
And when I got there to the ER, the doctors said, "It's a good thing you came because the baby's having an asthma attack and we needed to give it oxygen. And had you waited any longer, it would not have ended well."
Oh, wow.
So and she was a young parent too. So as young parents, what do we know? What do we know? Um, and sometimes, if you're a rebel spirit, if you're strong-minded, especially teenagers, teenagers think they know things. I thought I knew all kinds of things that, in hindsight, you don't know much.
Yeah. But I love, that you kept going. You like, I need to learn something, and that we are continuous learners. We never stop.
Right. And so I think that that's a thing that served me really well, but it was kind of unconscious for me because of the mentorship I had. But I think about what happens for young girls or young girls, single parents who they're young, they're inexperienced, they didn't have good guides on their own, and they didn't have the mentorship that I had that trained the brain to say, "I want to stay curious, I want to be a forever learner."
Mhm.
Right? I had that embedded, so that was my saving grace. But what about if you don't have that? I think the single biggest thing that we can go into as a single parent is having this mentality of always staying curious. And we're there, and I know that now. And I wish I even had more of that. If anything, I wish I had more of that. Less, I wish I had when I was a teenager, less I know and more I don't know, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I have more questions than answers. And I think I could have made even more progress and done an even better job with my first son if I had really just had somebody telling me, just stay open, stay curious, ask a lot of questions. It's okay to ask a lot of questions. It's okay to not know the answers.
Yes, you're right. But often we are afraid to ask. It's like asking for help. You're supposed to figure things out on your own.
Yeah, because we get told that. We get told you'll figure it out. But your parents say, "Okay, you're going to college now. Okay, you're going to get a job now. You're going to get your apartment. Here's your dice. Put them in your pocket." Right? It's random. And then you have these random experiences, and there's nothing by design. And you're lucky. You're lucky if you can find a mentor, if you can find a support group, if you can find the community that you need to support you. It's not enough that we just release our young people into the wild. It's not enough.
You're right.
We need each other. We need each other. Humans need each other. We need to support each other. This isn't the way it always was, right? We used to live in towns and villages and places where people supported each other, and we sat around and told stories at night, and we shared a lot of wisdom. And as humans moved to cities and, industrialization came and all these, and I'm not saying that there aren't benefits to all the progress that humans have made, but certainly one of the things we've lost is our support groups. And in our support groups are our humanity. It's why I write, because I find in writing, especially on medium.com, I find that we become a community together of like-minded people, yes, but also we get to be introduced to new ideas, new ways of thinking about things that help us reframe how to look at a challenge, how to look at a problem, how to look at a solution to something. And that is priceless because we don't have to do it. We're not an island and we don't have to do everything alone. So as a single parent, that's the biggest thing we can do is find our connections, find those people that think like us, but also some that don't. Because when we find the people that don't think like us and we listen to them, we can open our minds to new ways that maybe were something we needed to hear all along. And that's hard because you get into those places where, especially when you're growing up, where people are programming you to say you can do this, you can figure it out, and you got this, and you're like, but do I really? I don't know.
If you could go back in the past, would you do anything differently?
That's such a hard question because I love my boys. If I said, "Oh, I wouldn't get married and have a child as a teenager," I wouldn't have my boy.
True,
You know,
true.
right?
Yeah.
So so what would I do differently? I there's this thing in the Christian Bible, there's a saying I've written about this that says, be fruitful and multiply. And I think there's an editorial error in the Bible. I think it's supposed to say be fruitful, comma, then multiply. Make your money first,
Yeah.
become fruitful yourself, right? Then multiply. So think of a tree, think of an apple tree, any tree that bears fruit. The tree doesn't have fruit in the beginning. It grows, it grows, it grows. It has a couple flowers. The first season, it might have a couple apples, not many, and they're not even very good. They're not big apples, they're tiny little puny apples. and then and the tree, as it grows and becomes fruitful, has more and more apples, bigger apples, and it has enough to share with the land and with the community. And at that point, so many apples that some of them will fall onto fertile ground, hopefully fertile ground, and grow into new trees. So that we can learn a lot just looking at nature.
You're right.
Right? The tree doesn't automatically have offspring just because it can. So sometimes, I'm getting ready to write a piece right now about my experience with Kmart and the lessons of just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true for parenting too. Sometimes we don't always have a choice. We don't always have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are people who get pregnant and they become a single parent, or, at any stage in their life, they lose the partner.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen by their choice. Life can be very random, and it's not anybody's fault. It's not anybody's fault. It just happened. And so, how can we turn what happened, what looks like it happened to me, to it happened for me? In this experience, I learned some important life lessons. And I was able to share what I learned with my child who I raised by myself. And what will we take out of that together? And learning, seeing that for a child of a single parent, to see how their parent deals with different with challenges, with difficulties in life, they learn so much because they're sponges. They watch you, they pattern after you. If they see you laugh and smile and sing through your challenges, they're going to remember that their whole life.
Yes. They do what you do, not what you say.
Exactly. Yeah, forget about the words.
And
Because that thing that happens where this happens to all parents. You say a thing, you say a thing, you say a thing, you say a thing. You say it 3 times, 5 times, 8 times. They don't listen. It looks like they don't change their habits. Nothing happens. Then they go to the neighbor's house or they go to their best friend's house. They come home and they say, Mom, so and so's mom said da 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 da. And that's exactly what you had been saying 8 times. All of a sudden, the aha goes up, and you just know you've been saying it, but all of a sudden they get it because somebody else said it. But guess what? It's not like it's not that your words didn't matter. It's that you planted all the seeds and you watered them and watered them and watered them. And all of a sudden, the roots took and someone else watered again. And all of a sudden, the leaves popped.
I love that analogy. You're so right. Even as adults, we could hear the same thing 25 times, and then on the 26 times, the light bulb goes off.
All of a sudden, the light bulb goes off. Now, this is the way humans work. The funny thing is, advertisers know this. The people at Facebook know this. The advertisers on TV and radio know this. And that's why you hear advertising over and over and over again until you can hear the songs in the jingles in your head. They know that you have to hear it. So I went to a course one time, IBM paid for it, and it was a direct marketing association course. It was down in the city and it was held in the old World Trade Centers buildings that came down. And anyway, in the course, they said the first time humans hear a thing, they go, what is that? It's like a mosquito buzzing around your head. And the second time, same thing. And the third time you go, oh, there it is again. You're starting to hear it. It takes 5 to 7 times before we actually stop and listen to the words. So as single parents, knowing this is what advertisers know. Parents are giant advertising machines. We're just advertising to our children.
You're right. You're right. What is the most important trait to instill in a child?
So we can instill in our children compassion and love and understanding. Those things that we love, that we find higher ethics, we get to instill those. So I'm going to share with you this story about when my second son, I used to make dinner for him. So I knew that, we have these voices in our heads, right? And the voices in our heads say, whatever messages we're replaying to ourselves, you're not good enough, or you're good enough, or whatever. Is it a positive message you hear the voice in your head saying, or is it a negative message? I knew this all along when my children were growing up. With my second son, I got very crafty, and I would serve him his dinner. And as I was serving his dinner, I would say to him, I wouldn't say, "Here's your dinner, son, enjoy your dinner." I would say, "Thank you, Mom. You're the best mom. You're the greatest mom in the world. I love you, Mom." And I would do that over and over again as I'm serving him dinner. I would say that out loud. And one day he looked at me and said, "What is wrong with you, Mom? None of my friends' parents talk like this. What are you doing?" But he's 28 now. And you know what he says to me? "I love you, Mom. You're the best mom. I'm going to take care of you when you get home." We get to instill the little voice in our heads. The little voice in our heads are just the things we hear that we've always heard other people say to us. So when we think about that, and we think about what are the messages that we're gifting our children, that they're going to replay in their heads. It sounds really silly what I said, and he thought it was pretty ridiculous. But I promise you, with, the quality time I spent him and the silly things I said, we have an amazing relationship, and he has a lot of heart and compassion, not just for me, but for his friends and for the fellow humans that he walks with in the world. And that makes a huge difference in the world.
Yeah, totally, totally. I love how you did it. Because it's true, it's the things that we remember people say, and that they then become part of our own beliefs and our own thoughts. So by planting seeds, then we can have a better harvest later in life.
Exactly.
So what is your advice for single parents who are just stepping onto the journey of single parenting?
Yep. Find a good support group. Find a good support group. And it can be anybody. You can find those groups in libraries, you can find them in the community, you can find them in churches, you can find them, you just have to seek them out. Have some good, reliable, and it doesn't have to be your parents. It doesn't have to be, it can be somebody really unlikely, but it's important to find your people that empathize. How do you find those? How do you know they're the ones? Right? So think about it this way. The people that are your support are the people that when they see you, when you walk into the room, they light up. Irina, I'm so happy to see you. Right? You know those people because they light up, because their light is going to also bring your light out. Then together, right? Those two flames together, fire.
You're right. You're right.
Now we do a support group. I started a nonprofit for women specifically, and it's called the Garden of Neuro Institute. And we run an awful lot of projects for women all around the world. It's free to join. Women only need to go search Garden of Neuro. It's Neuro, like neuroscience. and or neurons in the brain. And there's an awful lot of support there, and women supporting each other. And we do that all online because we're a global group. And also, I'm running a live workshop here in Rhinebeck. It's writers writing to be read, and we have writers, poets, comedy writers, every genre you can imagine, coming together for a retreat the last weekend in October at the Omega Institute for Holistic Learning. So if you're looking for live mentorship of in the writing community, because a lot of healing and support happens just, through the pen. Sometimes we're not comfortable enough to say what we want to say when we're looking for support or when we're looking for guidance in certain areas. And this is certainly one of them. I know I used journaling a lot when I was growing. I have books and books of journals from when I was a single parent because there was nobody to listen to and I had thoughts, right? So I would journal every single day about what was going on in my life. Going back and reading them, it's kind of ick now, but because I've grown so much. But sometimes just pen and paper can be a really good support if you don't have a live person in the moment. So that's happening in October as well.
Awesome. And yeah, you're so right about writing. When I started writing, it's not only you sharing a story, but then when you're rereading it, something changes inside of you and you kind of see yourself in a different light. And maybe you learn more lessons that were there to be learned that you maybe didn't notice before. And sometimes we are maybe afraid to speak, but when we let it out, as long as we let our emotions out of us, so they're not destroying us from the inside, but we're able to express them in any form, whether through singing or writing or painting or any kind of creative outlet, I think is important to get it all out of you.
That's right. Exactly so. Go back to that thing that I was saying earlier about women have this unique challenge where our voice isn't always loud. It's often very quiet and it's often so internal because we've had millennia of women being told, oh, you can't read, you can't write, you can't speak, you have to sit, you have to be quiet, you have to behave yourself, be a good girl, all these things, and generations of it. So expecting women to just miraculously become leaders, there's a path that we have, and the first thing we have to do is find our voice. And that's not always so easy. And then when you're a single parent, oh my gosh, it's complicated, right? It's magnified by the fact that you've got this awesome responsibility, and maybe you haven't even developed your voice yet. So writing is a really good way, and any of the creative endeavors are a really good way. I know of developing your voice. I know my mother was a singer, and I remember being a little girl and she sang all the time. She sang through the house. She sang through her pain. She sang through her challenges. She sang through all the things. And, some of those songs were incredibly sad and some of them were incredibly joyful. And I remember every single one. So how we find our voice through our creative outlet is important.
Yes, yeah, you're so right. For me, singing, what allowed me to heal, as I could sing what I couldn't speak. And I think it's incredible what it can do for you, no matter your age, no matter how young you are in life. It allows you, it's so important to find your voice through singing, through writing, through speaking, any outlet is healing and beneficial. And just like you said, because we have a millennia of, be quiet, don't say anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta feed the picture, don't cause any trouble.
Exactly. And so some of the big business schools right now, they're all saying, oh, it's good to have women in leadership. We should have more women in leadership. Our businesses will do better. The men are all saying this. but then, the business schools are teaching, oh, you have to have better emotional, EQ, right? Emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, you tell a woman she needs to have better emotional intelligence, and she starts doing more self-gaslighting. Because guess what? We invented this emotional intelligence thing. Women have always done emotional intelligence. That's our specialty. So don't put me in a business school, expect me to be a leader in your company and say, you need to be better at emotional intelligence. Now, again, you're attacking my voice and my agency and my capabilities because I'm already doing that. Right. So we need to honor each other. We need to honor our particular skills and not just think that it's one size fits all, because it isn't.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Thank you. Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
Oh no, I don't. It's a journey. It's a journey, and we're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we have to have the grace to forgive ourselves in the moment. Ah, look what I did. Ah, right. I think I won't do that again. Being mindful in the moment, right? There was a time when my little one, we had a beautiful day at the park. It was gorgeous weather, and we went out and we had a picnic, and we're in the grass and just enjoying the sunshine. And we stayed out very late at night as we got home after sunset, and he was exhausted. And I put him to bed. And of course, we were rolling around in the lawn and the dirt and everything. He was kind of dirty when I put him in the crib.
Mhm.
And I remember dropping him in the crib and thinking, placing him in the crib. I didn't drop him in the crib. and I and I remember thinking to myself, if I was a good mom, I would have given him a bath before I put him into bed. And then I stopped myself and said, where did that come from? That was clearly a message that I had heard. And in that moment, I said, you know what? He's resting, he's sleeping, he's peaceful. I will give him a bath in the morning. I'll do extra laundry because the sheets are going to get all dirty, whatever. He's sleeping, and we had a great day, and I'm not going to disturb a sleeping baby. And I'm going to stop telling myself if I was a good mother. I'm going to stop telling myself I'm a bad mother. I'm a good mother. What we tell ourselves also matters. So we have to have the grace to give ourselves the permission to make mistakes and the permission to be okay with learning as we go.
Very well said. There is a great book by Marisa Peer, Tell Yourself Better Lies, because we constantly tell ourselves lies, or if we say lies that are beneficial, just like planting seeds and, making then better decisions next. But we always like, I'm not
Absolutely.
good enough. I never did this before, and people always treat me this way. But then, is it always like that?
Right.
And or is it specific circumstance? And then we generalize.
Exactly. Exactly. So, yes, I love that quote. That's a good one.
Yeah. If people would like to connect with you, learn more about you, read your articles on Medium, where would they go?
So on Medium, you can search me. It's at my handle on Medium is at Susan Brearley. And the interesting thing about Medium is it is there, there's millions of people out on Medium. It's long form. It was founded by a guy who was one of the co-founders of Twitter. I like to think that he started Medium because he was regretful of starting Twitter. It's like, oh, course correction, let's do better.
Yeah.
One of our taglines in my community is building better communities. And in a writing community like Medium, you get for free, you can be a Medium member for free. But then you get to read like 5 articles. It's $5 a month for unlimited reading. And it's a really easy platform to also blog on. And I run 5 publications there. I'm the editor-in-chief and publisher of 5 publications, and we're very supportive of new bloggers and new writers and helping people find their voice to the end of finding better, building better community. And the community there, the platform itself has changed my life. I have found people in the world I never would have found any other way, but we are a community of people that support each other. And so talk about a support group that you can access even as a single parent from your home at night, after the babies are asleep. So that's priceless. And we have a lot of single parents also that are in our writing community there. So, yep, that's a good way to find me. But if you type Susan Brearley in Google, you'll find me. I'm all over.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. We'll include everything in episode notes. It's been a pleasure to have you. And think you've done a wonderful job raising your 2 boys, and you instill such great qualities in them, by planting seeds when they're young. And now you're able to have this amazing relationship with them, which is amazing.
Yes. And I would say also as a single parent, it's hard to see this when you're young. I'm 66 now. When my second one went out of the home, left and, apartment, job, good, all of that, I was really faced with, well, what do I do next? So the life I lead now was really something I had to craft after the second one left. If there's one thing I could tell single parents, even though it may not be the thing that's top of your mind right now, is think about, set aside some time during while you're raising your child. Think about what you'd like to do after they leave the house, because they will leave the house. And you don't want to be in a place where you have nothing to do, where you're depressed, where you're thinking, what's the point of my life? What's the purpose of my life? Give that some thought, because that day will come. It comes a lot faster than you think it will. And having a purpose in your life once they're out of the house will make a huge difference, not just in your life, but also in theirs, because they also want the best for you when they get out.
Yes, this is very powerful advice, and you're so right. Yeah. We gotta think of the future and set aside time and decide what we want to create.
Yeah, exactly. And like you've done, Irina, you've done an amazing job with this podcast. And I'm so grateful to be here and be able to speak with you and your audience, and keep up the good work. I mean, we need resources like this in the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah.